Hey there, greetings from Las Vegas and welcome to week 8 of the pro football season and happy Halloween. Just like the kids, hey, we're going to go trick-or-treating too. Find out what kind of treats and tricks are in here. Why is there tape in here? Beat the Odds starts right now.
From our Las Vegas studios, this is Beat the Odds, sponsored by Superbook Westgate Las Vegas.
Oh, welcome inside our festive Las Vegas studio. I'm Dave Hall.
And I'm Mariah Janos. What's a scarier Halloween sight? A zombie or Jack dressed up as a French maid?
He better, we'll find out in a couple of minutes. He better not have.
Yeah, we'll also find out what's in the bucket.
Besides the tape?
Besides the tape, some tricks, some treats, and some betting surprises.
All right, well, coming up, Teddy and hopefully a fully clothed Jack. We'll talk about some scary teams to bet on right now, or maybe not bet on. Plus, the boys looking to stay scorching hot with their best bets.
And what's spookier than being on the trade block as the trade deadline approaches? I'm looking at players teams should be trick-or-treating for. Plus, Brandon Marshall is back to talk about defenses around the league. I'll be back. Dave, over to you.
All right, Mariah, thank you. Well, thank goodness it's not the French maid. What are you going with here, Jack?
Well, my clothes on. No, I'm adult film star Richard Pounds.
All right, well, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Mr. Richard. Teddy as well, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm just the guy that won last week.
Your tape's not working too well.
No,
Jack.
your tape's not working too well. I'll tell you what else is not working too well are some of the teams out there that we thought were going to be pretty good.
Well, let me dip into the bucket right here. First of all, the tape. This is obviously for you.
I need that.
Because Teddy is so well behaved. He gets the Hershey's cookies and cream.
Attaboy.
And I got this piece of paper with some football teams on it. Let's start with you, Teddy. The Bolts, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. What can you tell us about those three teams?
Well, we're going with a Halloween theme. Let's talk about scary teams to bet on, including the Bolts. What I don't want, favorites, especially bigger favorites, with a bad defense. LA, the talent's there. The numbers haven't been there, and they're laying more than a touchdown this week against Chicago. That's a scary team to bet. Scary team to bet on, underdogs with a bad offense. New Orleans, Pittsburgh, Green Bay. If you can't get to 21, you can't come through the back door. So when those teams fall behind, they struggle to come back. And of course, the inconsistent teams, Washington, LA, Cleveland. 1 week good, 1 week bad. Those teams can be scary to bet on as well. It's definitely worth noting. Over the last 2 years, only 8 teams finished better than 10-7 against the spread, and only 9 teams finished worse than 7-10 against the spread. The majority of the league swings back to the middle at some point during the season.
All right, and for you, Richard, Detroit and Miami. What are you talking? I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'll tell you how everybody else is doing.
I felt like combing that thing.
The public's not doing well because last week the top 7 teams that the public placed bets on all did not cover the number. That's a bad start for them. And a poster child of that would be what we got with Detroit and with Miami, who had done nothing but improve every week. People that felt like they might be ready to take that next step, get up there with Kansas City and Philadelphia and others. What we saw were it's kind of a recheck, gut check time as they both got rolled up. Detroit, not good against Baltimore. Miami, by the way, this is not real. All right, Baltimore.
You can't tell at all.
And Miami loses to Philadelphia really bad. So you got both those teams that we thought might be taking that next step. Now they are going to have to reconsider where they are, as is the general public, where they're putting their money.
Does that mustache give you more prognosticating powers?
You know, it allows me to move it around. Honestly, I mean, I can do this. I look at this.
Oh, wow. Now you got a goatee. Now you look like Abe Lincoln.
Now
We went from Andy Reid to the anti-Andy Reid.
I'm ahead of a biker gang right now.
Wow.
How you doing?
What's the name of that gang?
It's not pretty, all right? You're tough initiation. So, yeah, Halloween's over here because we're ready to make some money as we get into segment 2 and 3. And but the general public having to take a redo on what they've been putting their money on because the last couple of Sundays, not good for the general public plays.
I'm afraid this thing's going to crawl off.
I want my money back, by the way.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll check back in a minute. By the way, when it comes to people watching on Halloween, no better place than a Vegas casino. You see some things. Mariah is at the Superbook Westgate Las Vegas with more.
Thanks, Dave. I'm here with EVP of Superbook Operations, Mr. Jay Cornegay. We're already on to week 8. Wild, but let's go back to week 7. How'd you guys do here at the book?
We did fantastic. If you haven't noticed, a lot of upsets over the last couple of weeks, and that usually treats the operators in a positive way, and we were no different. Whenever we have those type of upsets, teams that are not expected to lose, but they end up on the short end, the books normally do very well, and that's what happened to us.
Speaking of upsets, San Francisco dropping 2 in a row. How does that impact the power rankings?
Yeah, it was really surprising to see that team because they were the top-ranked team in the league, and after 2 losses, they dropped down to the 3rd spot behind Kansas City and Philadelphia, but they're very talented. We expect them to be there at the end. We know that they have a couple of quarterback health issues, but they're not long-term, so we expect them to be right there contending at the end of the season.
Now, the trade deadline is quickly approaching. How do those moves impact odds?
The trade deadline is something that we definitely keep an eye on. There are only a couple players that really would have an impact on the odds. Usually they're all pro receivers or running backs and, of course, quarterbacks. But most of the time, they're small adjustments, very minor, unless it's an all-pro player switching teams.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. Dave, we'll send it back to you in studio.
Thank you, Mariah. Up next, Jack and Teddy are going to flex a little bit. Not their biceps, obviously, but their brains. They have a betting trend that's going to blow your mind. Plus, Brandon Marshall tells us what happened to that vaunted Cleveland defense.
Before we take our first time out, with an upset over Buffalo in Week 7, New England head coach Bill Belichick recorded his 300th career victory, putting him in elite company among the all-time greats. Who are the other 2 head coaches with at least 300 career wins? The answer after the break.
Beat the Odds is sponsored by Superbook Westgate Las Vegas.
Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you, outside of Bill Belichick, who are the only other 2 head coaches with at least 300 career wins? The answer, the great Don Shula and George Halas, who recorded 328 and 318 career wins, respectively.
Oh, sorry to say it, Mariah, but Belichick and your boys will only be watching the big game this year, but we are fired up to host it right here in that stadium in Las Vegas, and you'll be a winner. If you scan that QR code, it will take you to our website, beattheoddstv.com. Well, let's welcome back in our champion, Brandon Marshall. As always, Brandon, great to have you. So we spent a lot of time in our segment talking about San Francisco and Cleveland, and specifically their defenses. What happened?
It's kind of interesting to see, Gardner Minshew and Josh Downs and the Indianapolis team, put all those yards and points.
Almost a 40-burger.
Almost a 40-burger on Cleveland's stout #1 defense, by the way.
Right.
The only reason they lost the game is because they turned the ball over 4 times. But, clearly we saw some major holes within this Cleveland's defense, and maybe some other teams could take advantage of it.
In San Francisco, their defense has still been okay. Yeah. Has Brock Purdy been exposed?
I think San Francisco's defense has been more than okay. But Brock Purdy, right? Brock Purdy, that offense has been a little stagnant. Last week against Cleveland, again against Minnesota. Brock Purdy has been the golden boy, right? He has actually exceeded all expectations as Mr. Irrelevant, but he's starting to hit that wall. He didn't have a rookie wall. We call it in the league. We call it a rookie wall. Yeah. Sometimes rookies are playing well, and then it just hit a standstill at sometimes, right? So maybe Brock Purdy is finally hitting his wall, and he's got to get over the hump and see how he does.
We'll see if he can bounce back this week. As a former linebacker on a great team in Denver, a great defensive team, and you're playing a team that you should just be pounded. Yeah. But for some reason, they're just driving the ball up and down on you. As a player, how frustrating is that? How do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, we saw that with San Francisco and Minnesota. It is frustrating. I'm sure nobody picked Minnesota to win that football game, and I've been around that a lot. So it's what's going on? But you kind of overlook that opponent a little bit because you understand who it is. Maybe the Jacksonvilles of the world.
Sure.
Especially
so even at that level, sometimes you can look past an opponent.
Well, sometimes you kind of already mark a team as a win. Now, obviously, it's still competitive. Everybody is professional athletes, so we still know, okay, we have to come in with our 100% A game, but at the same time, we still understand, that's Jacksonville. But then when they're in the game with us, now it's all right, now hold on.
Right. We got to wake up and get to work here.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I guess it's too late.
Yep.
All right, Brandon, as always, thank you for your insight. Appreciate you. As we say bye to Brandon, we now say hello to Jack once again. He has some crazy betting numbers about teams going on bye weeks. Jack, take it away.
Yeah, you know, the power of the buy is a big thing. When I was super fat, I would go to buffets a lot, and at the end of the night, after eating all evening, I would eat fruit right at the end of the night, because the next morning when I woke up and I gained 7 pounds, I wanted to be able to say, hey, I had fruit. That's good, right? Because I wanted to feel good about myself. There's some power of the buy that will transition into this week with some of these teams. Home favorites going into their buy are hitting about 65% since 2015. Really, really strong trend. And it's because they want to feel good about themselves right before they go into their break. San Francisco and Detroit, both in those situations against teams they should have an advantage over. San Francisco, we've talked a little bit about the last week or so, their turnover issues, certainly what happened against Minnesota. But this team 5-0 against the spread, their last 5 in home games, have even better numbers when you look longer term against the number, and should be able to put up points in this spot, even if they go with the backup quarterback. Detroit, playing a Las Vegas team that a lot of people know is not very good, not going to score a lot of points. And Detroit offensively, generally speaking, has been very, very good at putting up points. So look for both of these to be good spots for teams before they hit into the bye, making themselves feel a lot better, especially after what happened last week.
You know what else they do? They eat fruit at halftime.
Right. You get orange wedges.
It works for you.
Start in the second grade, give them some orange wedges and a juice box, and get back out there. Let's cover some numbers.
All right, Teddy, I know you have some great information as well.
Sure. Jack's talking about teams before the bye. I'm going to talk about teams after the bye. And we always think, oh, they're rested, they're ready, they're healthy, they're focused. Not so fast, my friends. So after bye this week, we're talking about Cincy, Dallas, Tennessee, New York, Gang Green, New England, and Houston. So 6 teams coming back from the bye. Home teams, doesn't matter if they're favorites or underdogs. They're both negative subsets. Home teams off a bye. Again, I go back to 2015, just like Jack. That's when the extra point moved back. That's the modernist era of pro football. We're talking about home teams since then, 45% ATS. Road favorites off a bye, a little bit better. But 50-50 doesn't make any money, especially when you factor in juice. The only profitable subset for teams coming off a bye since 2015, road underdogs. Those might be teams to look at this week in that role.
Which would be a Cincinnati, right? They're playing San Francisco. It looks like Brock Purdy's going to be out this week, so perhaps that's an opportunity.
It's not an opportunity. I just said San Francisco's going to cover. They're going into the bye.
Uh-oh.
We've got some numbers that go both ways. But,
of course.
But it's all about finding, the general public wants to find common sense reasons why things happen, and that creates value against that a lot of times. Teddy's right. The general public would think coming off a bye, they've had extra time. In college, there's a little bit of that at play. Not in pro football. It's an overvalued situation where you're going to find value playing against it.
And when you talk about these type of teams, you know, that had that extra time and in theory are supposed to be rested, ready, and focused, well, the markets adjust for that, hence the lack.
We like to forget that the line setters also have TV sets. They're aware that they were off last week. They know they watch the games too.
All right, so these two are going to go off and get some orange slices. And then up next, they're about to throw down. It's our player prop battle this week. They're going to battle over someone who's really not getting much attention this year, like hardly any at all. I believe his name is Kelce, Travis Kelce.
Taylor Swift's boyfriend.
Oh.
That's what we call him now.
Before we head to break, with 179 yards in Week 7, Kansas City tight end Travis Kelce recorded his 5th career game with at least 150 receiving yards. Who is the only tight end with more such games? The answer after the break.
You're watching Beat the Odds, sponsored by Superbook Westgate, Las Vegas.
Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you who is the only tight end with more games of 150 receiving yards than Kansas City's Travis Kelce. The answer, Hall of Famer Shannon Sharpe. He did it 6 times. Kelce did it 5 times. All right, the trade deadline is quickly approaching, and depending on which team you play for, getting the call that you're being traded could could be pretty spooky. So I'm going through some of the top targets teams should be trick-or-treating for this season. First up, Buffalo. This team is on a mission to finally make it to the big game. But with how they've been playing lately, they've got to mix things up a bit. Josh Allen needs more help, with Stephon Diggs being the only reliable target, really. So I think it's time Buffalo makes a call to Tennessee to see if they can pick up DeAndre Hopkins. He's no longer a wide receiver 1, which would give Sean McDermott's offense another weapon on the outside. His contract is also an easy one to add since the receiver is owed just $1.25 million for the remainder of the season. Next, I'm looking at Detroit. The loss to Baltimore exposed the weaknesses of this team that had been hidden up until week 7. The fact that Lamar Jackson had 10 seconds to get the ball out for a perfect touchdown pass in that game tells me one thing: more explosiveness off the edge. Yes, they have number 1 draft pick Aiden Hutchinson, but he's just one guy. They need to supplement that defensive line. Detroit has the 6th lowest pass rush win rate at just 35%. So I'm looking at Carolina's Brian Burns. Despite being double-teamed on 23% of his pass rushing attempts, he's still delivering one of the highest pass rush win rates in football at 27%. Plus, he has 15 pressures and 4 sacks to show for it. Adding Burns would give Detroit a top 5 defense hands down. And finally, we're shaking things up. Derrick Henry to Tampa Bay. While Tampa isn't exactly a contender, they're only half a game back from Atlanta for the top spot in the NFC South. The success Todd Bowles' squad has been seeing in the culmination of things like defense, Baker Mayfield, and the pass game have been excellent, but the run game, non-existent. Rachaad White hasn't met expectations. Tampa just seems like a good spot for Henry, who would open things up for Mayfield in the pass game. If I had time to go down the list of what each team should do, I would, but this is only a half-hour show. So those are 3 teams and 3 targets to keep an eye out for, but we won't know for sure until All Hallows Eve.
All right, thanks, Mariah. These guys have not seen a gym since dinosaurs roamed the earth, but no matter. It's Teddy against Jack in our player prop showdown. Today, the boys will debate Travis Kelce. Jack,
who is that? Taylor's boyfriend.
I believe he plays for a football team in Kansas City.
Makes sense, and I think that is where we should begin. I have over his receiving yards this week, and I will tell you that I think his numbers have come up. A year or so ago, you could have got his receptions per game around 4, 4.5, or 5. It's now up around 7, and I don't have any factor in what Taylor Swift is doing or not doing. I don't care what she's seeing, not seeing. I do think the anatomy of this offense, though, has led Patrick Mahomes to a place where he has to get the ball to Kelce. Kelce's one of those guys, when you show up, you say, we've got to stop him, and nobody's been able to do that. His numbers are around 7 now. He only needs to break 1 or 2 to take a line from the great Teddy Covers. I only need 1 or 2 breakaways, and I get over the 72 yards. So give me over the total with Kelce on Sunday.
So let's start with this. He's played 6 games this year, and in 4 of them, he didn't get to 70 yards. So it's not like it's an every week thing. It's the last 2 weeks thing for Kansas City's very high-profile superstar. And when you're talking about a guy who's gained 303 receiving yards the last 2 weeks, what happens? The markets adjust, the public jumps on board, and we're looking at 72.5 this week, and it may well go up between now and kickoff. Look, Denver allowed a grand total of 30 yards last week to Green Bay's tight ends. Now, admittedly, Green Bay's offense somewhat limited.
Somewhat.
But they only give up 67 yards to Conklin the week before, and when they give up 31 to Gang Green. So I'm not convinced Kelce has a monster game here under 72.5.
Not all heroes wear capes. He's taking his cape off. Swifty will probably be there. We're getting it over.
All right, boys. We'll find out this weekend. The only thing hotter than Swift and Kelce is these two and their best bets. The boys are on fire. See who they like this week. That's next.
Before we take our final timeout, with an interception in Week 7, Pittsburgh linebacker T.J. Watt became the 2nd player ever to record 7 interceptions and 70 sacks in their first 7 seasons. Who was the first to do it? Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you, before T.J. Watt, who was the first player to record 7 interceptions and 70 sacks in their first 7 seasons? The answer, maybe the best to ever do it, the great Lawrence Taylor.
All right, looking ahead to next week, we are hitting kind of the halfway point of the season already. Ooh. That is crazy. So we're going to head out some midterm grades, see which teams are grading high and which teams got some work to do.
Yep, and our boys are getting A+ for their best bets so far
Bravo,
this
boys,
season.
bravo.
The first A+ Jack has ever received, so let's see if they can stay hot.
Yeah, I got Miss Sassy Pants over here questioning Pittsburgh last week. They did nothing but
I
dominate.
wanted to keep you on your toes.
Well, if you think it took some skill level last week, get ready to be. This is a scary player. It's Halloween week. I mean, let's get weird. Okay, let's play somebody that nobody wants to touch. How about Carolina? Right, Carolina, no wins, no covers, barely showing up, can't find their helmet, don't know what's going on. This team, we talk about the middle. You're never as bad as you appear, never as good as you appear. Only 5 teams in the history of the league have gone defeated they've lost every single game. This team's going to beat somebody. This is the anatomy of a game that they would win. They play a Houston team that doesn't score a lot of points, also makes a lot of mistakes. They get the game at home. Also, Carolina 4-1 against the spread, their last 5 against Houston. Give me Carolina on this Halloween week to not only get their first cover, but their first win of the year. So hold on to your hat. It's Halloween week.
Woo! Going bold.
All right, Teddy, what do you got?
That's scary. Mine isn't so scary. I mean, I'm going to talk about Atlanta, a -3 against Tennessee, and we already heard Mariah talking about it. Let's trade DeAndre Hopkins. Let's trade Derrick Henry. Half of this Tennessee team is on the trading block right now. Byers already got traded to Philly. That's an issue for a team at this stage of the season. And of course, it doesn't look like they're going to have their starting quarterback. Levis is supposed to start this week, and he's not someone who I'm particularly excited about against a good Atlanta defense. Meanwhile, Desmond Ridder, yeah, he makes mistakes. But he also threw for 10 yards per pass attempt last week against a quality defense. And the fact that Atlanta had 3 red zone turnovers and still found a way to win tells me there's a buy sign on this team. There you go, Atlanta.
Teddy has a man crush on Atlanta.
They're making me money.
Well, that's a good thing, right? We're trying to stay ahead of the curve.
No doubt about it. All right, you guys, thanks as always. Happy Halloween, everyone. Have a great time. I guess it's not technically till Tuesday, but the next time we'll see you.
The whole weekend is...
That's true.
It's like Festivus. We're going to celebrate it all week long.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. I don't want to see any more costumes from you, Jack. That's for sure.
I'm taking it back, believe me.
See you guys next week.